March 27th, 1977. What began as a routine day turned into the deadliest aviation disaster in history. Two Boeing 747s, KLM Flight 4805 and Pan Am Flight 1736 collided on the runway at Los Rodeos Airport in dense fog. In just moments, 583 lives were lost. This is the Tenerife disaster. Earlier that day, a bomb threat at Las Palmas Gran Canaria Airport forced multiple diversions to the small, ill-equipped Los Rodeos Airport. This airport's single runway and minimal infrastructure had no parallel taxiways, which led to a traffic jam of massive aircraft. As darkness settled and fog rolled in, visibility plunged. Pilots and the control tower relied entirely on radio. A garbled instruction combined with cross transmissions created fatal confusion. Multiple voices overlapped, and amidst it all, control clearance blurred with a zoom permission. Meanwhile, Pan Am was still on the runway, and KLM began its takeoff roll. At 17:06, KLM began its takeoff roll. Just meters ahead was Pan Am still on the runway. The impact tore through Pan Am's fuselage, and both planes erupted in a fiery inferno. All 248 people on board KLM perished, and Pan Am only saw 335 fatalities. Only 61 survived, many escaping through a ruptured fuselage near the wing. But how did we really get here, having two Boeing 747s crash into each other on a runway? So let's set the stage back in Canary Islands in 1977. It was a quiet Sunday on the Canary Islands, a popular holiday destination off the coast of Africa. Normally, Los Rodeos Airport on Tenerife was a sleepy regional airfield handling small domestic flights and the occasional international arrival. But that day, chance and tragedy would converge in ways no one could have foreseen. Earlier that afternoon, planted by the separatist group ETA exploded at Gran Canaria's Las Palmas Airport. Although no one was killed, Spanish authorities quickly shut the airport down to search for additional explosives. This single decision, routine in such circumstances, unleashed a very bad domino effect. Dozens of incoming aircraft, including two giant queens of the sky, the Boeing 747s of KLM and Pan Am, had to divert to Tenerife's Los Rodeos Airport. A small airport not designed for such heavy traffic suddenly became gridlocked with massive wide-body jets. Los Rodeos had only one runway, and a single narrow taxiway at that. Once aircraft landed, they were forced to backtrack along the runway to reach the terminal. Parking space was limited, and within an hour, jumbo jets from across Europe crowded the apron, forcing crews and controllers into an unusual, sometimes improvised procedures. Among them were KLM Flight 4805 from Amsterdam and Pan Am Flight 736 from Los Angeles by the way of New York. These two aircraft, each weighing over 300 tons fully loaded, were never meant to meet here, let alone share the same strip of tarmac in near zero visibility. KLM passengers, mainly Dutch tourists, waited on board as the crew decided to refuel at Tenerife rather than risk further delays at Las Palmas later. The refueling alone cost nearly 35 minutes. Meanwhile, 396 of the Pan Am passengers remained seated for hours, frustrated, confined, and restless. Both aircraft crews were under mounting pressure, Pan Am eager to get moving. KLM, conscious of Dutch duty hour regulations that restricted how long pilots could legally fly before resting. By late afternoon, another complication set in. A thick blanket of fog descended over Los Rodeos, a common occurrence due to its elevation and proximity to the mountains. Visibility, already limited, dropped to a few hundred meters. Controllers in the small tower could barely see the runway. Pilots in the cockpit could not see each other's aircraft nor the tower. Tenerife also had no ground radar to track aircraft movement. Communication would now rely entirely on voice through radio transmissions, already crackling with static and overlapping signals. Shortly after 5 p.m., the weather closed in. Pan Am received instructions to taxi along the runway and to exit at the third taxiway, and then circle around to the terminal for departure. At the same time, KLM was instructed to taxi down the same runway, make a 180-degree turn at the far end, and then position itself for takeoff. But the taxiways at Los Rodeos were poorly marked, narrow and at odd angles. In the fog, Pan Am's crew struggled to find their designated exit. They missed the first two runoffs, searching for the third. The KLM, meanwhile, reached the runway threshold, turned around, and waited, its engines already spooling and its captain eager to depart. Now, inside KLM's cockpit sat Captain Jacob Van Santen, one of the airline's most experienced and respected pilots, a training captain and the face of KLM's advertising campaigns at the time. And because of the high regard that he was kept to, he was always pressured to maintain a schedule. And because of the delays, he was becoming impatient. The co-pilot and flight engineer voiced caution, but hierarchy in the cockpit culture of the 1970s meant that challenging the captain outright was very rare. Radio transmissions grew increasingly confusing. Controllers' instructions overlapped with Pan Am's position reports. Words like OK, stand by, and you are cleared fill the airways. But the messages weren't always clear who they were meant for. At 5:06 p.m., the fog was at its thickest. The Pan Am Jumbo was still lumbering down the runway, searching for its exit. The KLM, now fully loaded with fuel, sat at the far end, poised for takeoff. A garbled transmission from the tower, and Pan Am was misheard by the KLM crew. The captain believed he had clearance. His co-pilot, hesitant, attempted to clarify, but Van Zeten's authority was absolute. He pushed the throttles forward. The runway, choked in fog, now held two aircraft of unprecedented size hurtling toward the inevitable. Two 747s carrying nearly 650 people now found themselves lined up on the same fog-covered runway, a single strip of asphalt, one preparing to depart and the other taxiing straight towards it. The stage was set for disaster unlike anything aviation had ever seen. The nose of KLM Flight 4805 sliced into Pan Am 736. In an instant, the Dutch jumbo jet undercarriage ripped open the upper fuselage of the Pan Am aircraft. The sound was like an explosion, twisting metal, breaking glass, and the sudden roar of igniting jet fuel. The Pan Am jet was torn apart, the roof split open, flames shot through the cabin, and hundreds of passengers were thrown into chaos. Many were unfortunately unalived instantly in the forward section. For those still alive, the cabin filled with black smoke so quickly that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Passengers clawed their way toward the light, toward holes ripped in the fuselage. Some were leaping to the tarmac below in desperation. Out of nearly 400 on board, just 61 souls would make it out alive. The KLM aircraft, still carrying a full load of fuel for its journey back to Amsterdam, briefly lifted after the collision, before slamming back down onto the runway. What followed was a firestorm. The explosion consumed the jet in seconds. All 240 passengers and crew aboard perished, trapped in an inferno no human could survive. Emergency services rushed to the scene. But Los Rodeos was utterly unprepared for disaster of this scale. Fire trucks and ambulances were too few, their access slowed down by the cars that had clogged the airport roads during the earlier bomb scare. The flames, fed by thousands of gallons of jet fuel, were so intense that rescuers could barely approach. In a matter of minutes, Both aircrafts, once symbols of modern aviation, were reduced to burning wrecks. What had begun as a day of diversions, delays, and fog ended in the deadliest accident in aviation history. One survivor said, "We all settled back, and the next thing, an explosion took place and the whole port side was just torn open." Investigators from Spain, the Netherlands, and the United States descended on Tenerife. What they faced was unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Two Boeing 747s reduced to twisted wreckage, scattered across the runway in dense fog. The blackened debris field stretched hundreds of meters, and the acrid smell of fuel and smoke lingered for days. The first task was grim: recovering the flight recorders, or the black boxes. On the Pan Am jet, the cockpit voice recorder revealed that the frantic last word of the crews as they spotted the KLM aircraft at the final moment. "There he is," followed by the impact. The KLM recorder, however, revealed something even more chilling: Captain Jacob's calm yet mistaken belief that he had been cleared for takeoff. His confident voice contrasted sharply with the confusion echoing through the radio frequencies. Investigators quickly uncovered a critical factor: radio communication problems. Because Los Rodeos Airport had only one radio frequency for ground and air traffic, multiple transmissions overlapped, and at one point the Pan Am crew and air traffic control both responded to the KLM's cockpit at the same time. This resulted in what's called heterodyning, a distortion that cancelled parts of the message. To the KLM crew, it sounded as if they had been cleared for takeoff, but in reality, no such clearance had been given. Additionally, the weather played its part too. The thick, shifting fog that had blanketed the runway reduced visibility to almost nothing. Neither crew could see the other until it was far too late. At one point, Pan Am's captain asked for confirmation about taxiing, but the fog and the poor airport signage made navigation nearly impossible. Even seasoned pilots found the runway layout confusing under these conditions. The investigation also highlighted human factors. Captain Van Zanten wasn't just any pilot. He was KLM's chief flight instructor, the face of the airline's training program. He even featured in advertisements as the epitome of professionalism. His reputation made it nearly impossible for his first officer or flight engineer to openly challenge him. When the flight engineer timidly suggested that the Pan Am might still be on the runway, Van Zanten dismissed it. And seconds later, the disaster unfolded. This exposed a dangerous truth. The airline culture at the time was deeply hierarchical, often preventing junior crews from speaking up. The real report painted a complex picture. The KLM's captain's premature takeoff was identified as a direct cause, but investigators emphasized that the chain of circumstances that set the stage — the bomb threat in Gran Canaria, the sudden diversion to Tenerife, the crowded single runway airport, the thick fog, the radio interference, and the lack of clear ground radar. However, the tragedy wasn't in vain. Out of this catastrophe came sweeping changes to aviation safety. The concept of crew resource management, otherwise known as CRM, was born. A new training philosophy that encouraged open communication, teamwork, and the ability for any crew member, no matter their rank, to question a captain's decision if safety was at stake. Today, CRM is standard across airlines worldwide. Airports too learned their lessons. Runway markings and signage were standardized. Ground radar was installed at major airports, and stricter international phraseology was introduced in aviation. Communication to reduce ambiguity. Pilots were trained to never use casual phrases like "we are at takeoff," but instead speak standardized terms. The Tenerife investigation, though devastating, reshaped aviation forever. The lessons learned from those smoldering wrecks still echo in every cockpit and control tower to this day. On March 27, 2007, 30 years later, a memorial was erected atop Mesa Mota, an 18-meter spiral staircase titled The Stairway to Heaven by Rudy van de Wind. It is an endless ascent cut short, symbolizes the lives interrupted yet seeking peace. Tenerife's tragedy remains a solemn testament to the cost of miscommunication. But through loss, aviation grew safer, evolving with empathy, precision, and teamwork. We remember the 583 lives lost not just with sorrow, but with a commitment to vigilance in every flight. May the memory guide us to clearer skies. Thank you all so much for watching. This is my first video about an aircraft investigation. I am not entirely sure how this video turns out because as I'm recording this right now, I have no idea how the edit is going to look, but I hope it goes well. If you guys want to see more videos like this, or if you have suggestions about how you want me to cover these topics, please let me know in the comment section down below. Also, let me know if there are any other aircraft investigations, building disasters, true crime, or anything of the such you want me to cover. Just leave it in the comment section down below and I will do my best to research about it and make a script. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Again, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video.